We feel like our borders should be closed.
I'm here to show my support for all of the immigrant groups that are here.
People, if they want to come over, they can come over legally.
Caging kids, lying to the public. This is not America. This is not our country.
Immigration was a top concern for voters in the 2024 presidential campaign, with President-elect Donald Trump's promises to reduce it significantly contributing to his victory in November.
This is a tough one. We're going to end up with the largest deportation in American history. We have no choice.
Immigrants are welcome here. Illegals took my life away.
And although immigration policy continues to be hotly debated, the numbers are clear on one thing. The U.S. experienced an unprecedented rise in immigration leading up to the election. Between 2021 and 2023, net migration to the United States averaged 2.4 million people a year, or 0.6% of the overall population. The last time the U.S. experienced a comparable surge in immigration was around 1850, when it received about 190,000 immigrants annually, equal to 0.5% of the population at the time. While the two immigration waves differ greatly, both were driven by a complex multitude of political, historical, and environmental factors. 1850 was the first year that the U.S. Census began to track immigration by asking about place of birth. Nevertheless, prior records and estimates show that immigration was fairly low in the early part of the 19th century. This began to change in the 1840s. Among the pull factors were the young country's industrialization and western expansion, which created jobs and made land available for settlement. Some of this expansion also meant absorbing new populations, including more than 100,000 Mexican citizens living in territories annexed at the end of the Mexican-American War in 1848. The next year, the California Gold Rush began. The promise of riches as well as new opportunities for work and trade drew people all over the U.S. as well as other countries. The greatest number of foreigners arrived from Mexico and China, and the newly established Chinese community would soon play a major role in building the Transcontinental Railroad. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, several push factors were sending European immigrants to American shores. The Irish potato famine, which began in 1845 and decimated the country's population, caused the Irish to quickly become one of America's largest immigrant groups, concentrating in eastern cities like Boston and New York. Beyond Ireland, crop failures and urban overcrowding throughout northern Europe led farmers from Scandinavia and Germany to the U.S. and its vast tracts of fertile land. European migration was also driven by political events. Democratic revolutions that swept the continent in 1848 were largely suppressed, leading thousands of supporters and sympathizers to flee or emigrate to the New World. This included artisans, intellectuals, and merchants from Germany and the Austrian Empire, many of whom settled in the Midwest. Known as the 48ers, these progressive immigrant communities would contribute greatly to the Union Army during the Civil War. At the time, the U.S. had few restrictions on immigration, and borders were effectively open to anyone who managed to make the journey. While less than 2% of the population had been foreign-born in 1830, by the 1850s the population had jumped to 10%. However, many new immigrants faced poverty, difficult working conditions, and hostility that often spilled into mass violence. Native resentment was strongest where arrivals were distinct in culture and appearance like Chinese or religion like the Irish and German Catholics. The backlash would soon give rise to the country's first anti-immigration political movement, popularly called the Know Nothing Party, as well as the first major law restricting immigration, the Chinese Exclusion Act. Ironically, one of the biggest factors driving the recent immigration wave was the COVID-19 pandemic that shut down most of international travel in 2020. As countries began to reopen their borders and loosen restrictions in 2021, pent-up demand led to a migration surge. Although economic recovery was uneven, unemployment in many developed countries hit record lows, attracting job seekers from poorer ones. Mexico has continued to be the most popular country of origin for U.S.-bound migration, but its share has decreased as the immigrant pool has become more diverse. Arrivals from India, China, and the Philippines have been the next most represented, making up about 15% of the immigrant population. An increasing number of immigrants come from Africa and the Caribbean, driven by factors like chronic high employment in Nigeria, war in Ethiopia, and civil unrest in the Caribbean nation of Haiti. Many immigrants have also come from other parts of the Latin America region due to ongoing economic crisis in Venezuela and gang violence in places like El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And in Europe, Russia's invasion of Ukraine created an influx of people fleeing both countries. The experiences of today's immigrant groups vary widely. Compared to other demographics, Asian immigrants are more likely to receive post-secondary education and are well represented in healthcare, technical, and scientific fields. Hispanic immigrants are the largest and most diverse group, ranging from seasonal agriculture laborers to professionals. Although Hispanics make up the bulk of the undocumented population, most Hispanics in the country are citizens, and many Hispanic families have been in the U.S. for multiple generations, now comprising its second largest ethnic group. While immigrants are dispersed throughout the country, the largest populations are found in major cities such as New York and Los Angeles, and Hispanic immigrants are more numerous along the southern border. And while they continue to face racism and discrimination from the native-born population, many immigrants themselves hold anti-immigrant views and have increasingly supported politicians like Trump. The first Trump administration imposed strict deportation and detention measures, but failed to significantly curb illegal immigration. In contrast, the Biden administration's loosening of immigration restrictions, such as expanding asylum qualifications and pausing deportations, encouraged a rise in attempted border crossings, which tripled from pre-pandemic levels. Today, immigrants make up 14% of the U.S. population, but after a shift in policy and a crackdown on enforcement in 2024, net migration has been returning to its pre-pandemic levels, suggesting that the surge may be tapering off. U.S. immigration policy has been marked by tension between anti-immigrant sentiment and a reliance on immigrant labor, with sudden waves of immigration often followed by intense backlash and changes in government policy. But in the long run, the country has proven resilient in absorbing generations of immigrants into its social and economic fabric.